Ayala came up and spoke, and it was well received. And, he's been a good friend. He actually spent some time at Moreau Seminary, learning how to be a better man. Anytime a guy goes to seminary, it's always a win, even if the Lord's will is not priesthood. The Lord makes that clear. But emerged with a lot more understanding of theology and philosophy, which he's been applying. He's been working at St. Mary's Catholic High School in Phoenix for the last 5 years. He's married, has a son and a daughter on the way. He's also the basketball coach for the seminarian basketball team. They have one win. I thought they had another win this year. Please help me welcome Ryan Ayala.
Let's begin first. Holy Spirit. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
St. Luke,
pray for us.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you for your kind introduction, Father. So my name is Ryan Ayala. Like Father said, I work at St. Mary's High School, downtown Phoenix. I also work part-time youth ministry at a church called St. Thomas the Apostle in Phoenix. And I'm just really blessed to be here. I really do feel as if you guys, this Newman Center here at Flagstaff is one of the best Newman Centers in the country, just because what other Newman Center is getting these sort of guys to just voluntarily come and learn more about their Catholic faith. So I am really blessed to be here. Just a quick little shout out. So my friend Deacon Brian Kennedy here, when I was in seminary, we were roomies together, and so he's at a parish in Goodyear, and he is from Minnesota. So he was missing the fall weather and the cold weather, and so he was like, "Hey man, why don't you come up with me?" So we took a drive over. So he's from the Congregation of Holy Cross, a religious order. So great guy. So the title of my talk is How to Be a General of Your Own Army. And I want to start off on a depressing note. Here we go. 8 out of 10 men agree that how one lives is more important than being Catholic. 4 in 10 men believing that Catholicism does not have a greater share of truth than other religions. Only 26% of Catholic men consider themselves to be, quote, practicing Catholics. Only 34% of Catholic men strongly agree that Catholicism is among the most important part of life. Only 32% of Catholic men strongly agree that the sacraments are essential to their faith. 48% of men agree that Mass is boring, and 55% agree that they don't get anything out of Mass. Only 29% of men believe that weekly Mass attendance is very important. Only 28% of Catholic men believe that confession is very important. Only 30% of Catholic men strongly agree that daily prayer is important, and only 33% of Catholic men pray on a daily basis. Lastly, only about 1/3 of Catholic men, 33%, say they attend Mass on a weekly basis. So it's clear, this is from research that you can find online. But it's clear that we're living in a crisis of masculinity, especially Catholic masculinity in our culture. And it's not only in the realm of faith, but it's also in the realm of relationships. So in preparation for this talk, I made the mistake and the gift, and a good judgment to ask social media, what makes men so unattractive to you? Or what's unbecoming of men? And of course, I was greeted with a laundry list of things that just all came out at once. I also texted a few of my former students who are at Notre Dame, UD, ASU, NEU, just listen, you're young, you're Catholic, what are your thoughts on the crisis of men? And what sort of things are you unattracted to? Here's what they said. You ready for this? Girl number 1. Plays too much video games. Fortnite, man. Fortnite. Not willing to take women and their opinions seriously. Laziness. Cares about health and physical well-being, but not being obsessed over it. They are attracted to, this girl's attracted to certainty and convictions. Someone who doesn't stand for something or just agrees with whatever you say isn't attractive. So that's girl number one. Girl number two, I appreciate a guy who talks to me. That sounds pretty basic, but I'm always astounded at the number of males who cannot keep a simple conversation and see to have no interest in keeping one. She says, I'm looking for a guy that takes initiative. A guy who takes pride in his appearance and dresses nicely is also very attractive. Someone who takes initiative in their Catholic faith, and someone who takes their faith seriously but lives their life lightly. Girl number three, being weirdly prayerful about discernment. Girl number four, not being straightforward, not being a gentleman. Girl number five, asking for your number but not calling or texting. So, I read that with the statistics of Catholic men, with this area of relationships that I've encountered with these, hearing their experiences, and I'm forced to ask the question: what is it? What is the sort of underlying sort of complaints, or what is the underlying sort of problem that they're experiencing? And I'm convinced that if we're going to reverse this crisis of masculinity, this culture of masculinity, I think we as brothers need to start being serious about tapping into the virtue that has been sort of neglected. You don't hear it preached about often. You don't really even hear it talked about in like Christian ethics or Catholic philosophy. But it's a virtue that's very specific, that I think we as men need to start really tapping into if we're going to reverse this sort of crisis in our culture. And this virtue is the virtue of magnanimity. Magnanimity. Who here has heard of magnanimity before? Awesome. So magnanimity means to have a greatness of soul, to have a greatness of heart. And Aristotle, Greek philosopher, said that the person who's magnanimous considers himself worthy of great things. So he is convicted in his humanity. He is convicted in his self-worth. He is convicted in his self-dignity. He knows that he is more than just a plant. He knows that he's more than just an animal. But he's convicted that he is a rational, thinking human being who can choose to love, who has freedom, who has a heart, who has an intellect, who has a will. So he's convicted in that truth. So Aristotle understood that magnanimity is a striving for greatness. That's the first part of magnanimity. The second part of magnanimity is covered by St. Thomas Aquinas. And he says that those who are magnanimous are worthy of doing great things, consider themselves worthy of doing great things. So Aristotle says, I believe that I'm great. Aquinas says, because I'm great, I'm worthy to do great things. I'm worthy to do great things. So, I think it's important that we really kind of touch on this virtue again. That we really start to really focus on what it means to be a magnanimous person. We also have to be careful, because if we just focus on being magnanimous men who have magnanimity, the sort of greatness of soul that have been called to excellence, we could fall into the trap of kind of being egotistical, prideful, arrogant. It could just be about myself. So Aquinas says, if we are going to grow in magnanimity, then we also have to bring his twin sister along, humility. We need magnanimity. We need to know that we've been called, you and men, like we've been called for greatness, but we also need to know that we've been called to be humble. So in other words, if I know that I've been called to greatness, therefore, if that's true for me, then it's true for my brothers and sisters who are around me. I affirm that they also have been called for greatness, that they have also been called because they are worthy. Okay? So we need magnanimity and humility, okay? And then there's a vice. So you have magnanimity is a virtue, and we have a vice. And I actually don't really know how to pronounce it, but it's called Poulsenimity, okay? Which means to have a smallness of heart, to have a smallness of soul. It's to see yourself as someone who's unworthy, who's not courageous. And to point out this, to paint this picture a little bit more clear, I want to tell you a story about a priest who served in the Korean War. His name is Father Emile Capone. Have you guys ever heard of him? So long story short, Father Emile was born in Kansas, and he's always desired to serve as a military chaplain. And so he was sent off to the Korean War, where he served as a chaplain. And towards the end of the war, the United States sort of defeated Korea, and they were kind of backing off a little bit. And then one night, the Chinese communists bombarded the American soldiers, and they weren't expecting that, so they lost thousands of lives. But Father Emile would jump into no man's land, right? Which is, the area between the Americans and the Chinese, and he would step into this no man's land, and he would go to these soldiers who were dying, who were on the verge of death, grab them and pull them to the other side, and offer them last rites, anointing of the sick, and just to be there with them. Eventually, the Chinese communists got a hold of them, and they sent them off to a death march for 40 miles. And if anyone moved or anyone showed a sense of if they were limping or if they were sort of tired, if they would just stop, then the Chinese communists would just shoot them right there on the spot. Well, Father Emile Capone would carry this man all the way to the other side of, or up to the prison. And so, the Chinese communists hated Father Emile because he was so beloved by his people, by his troops. He would even call his people my boys. You're my boys. And he would say mass when he could in the prison. He would hear confessions secretly. Eventually, they hated him so much they would have him stand outside in the cold, naked, and just waiting for him and torturing him to recite the Chinese communist doctrine, and he would never gave in. The reason why I share that story of Father Emile is because that is a person who demonstrates both magnanimity and humility. He knows that he was called for greatness, and he called the greatness in others. He saw the greatness in others, right? So he also acted with humility. To demonstrate the opposite point, Poulsenimity, there is a character who has been deemed the most cowardice character in all of movie cinema. And his name is Sergeant Timothy Upham. Have you guys ever watched Saving Private Ryan? Have you guys ever watched Saving Private Ryan? So if you watch that movie, the translator who is sort of, he's with Captain Miller the whole time, he is brutal to watch. When you watch that movie, you see him, and you are almost repulsed by his cowardly actions throughout the whole movie. You almost to the point where you can't even watch it. Most producers, most actors say he is the worst character in all of movies. Not because how he played, not because of his acting skill, but because of who he embodied. And what we see is a man who is cowardly. We see a man who thought of himself very small of heart. So that's just I just wanted to demonstrate those two things. So if we're going to be magnanimous men, if we're going to be men who practice the virtue of magnanimity, I want to kind of share some practical ways that we can do that. I would say the first way is to pray and ask the Lord for an increase in magnanimity. So if you never prayed for it, ask the Lord to increase your desire to see yourself as someone who is made for greatness. Ask very specifically to the Lord, I don't think of myself as someone who's meant to be great. I don't have this holy boldness or confidence that I should have. Lord, please increase that in me. Please increase this desire in my heart. So I would say the first thing to do is pray and ask the Lord for an increase in magnanimity. To have a heart like Father Anil Kapan. Someone who knows that he's been called for greatness, but is always willing to serve those who surround him. The second thing I would say is seek out a man, a true man. I've been blessed. Before I met Jesus, before I met the Lord, before I met the church, I was living a pretty debaucherous lifestyle, pretty wicked lifestyle. I was headed the wrong path very quickly. It wasn't until I met this seminarian. I used to play basketball in high school. It would have showed it because I lost all these games. I used to play basketball in high school, and I remember I had to go to retreat because I had to. My mom made me go on this retreat, and I didn't really want to go. There was also a cute girl there, so she was sort of like the hook at the end of the whatever. So like I wanted to go. I remember I was on this retreat, right? It was actually up here in Prescott. And during break, we were playing basketball. And I was a basketball player, so I would go out and shoot a few hoops. And we had a seminarian with us at the time. His name was Pete McCormick. And I remember there was another parish with us there. I remember I fed him down low. He's on post, right? He's posting up. And then he just like bodies this kid, right? He bodies this kid. He was actually an adult, the guy. He bodies him, makes him fall to the ground. This adult gets up and pushes Pete McCormick. So me thinking, not knowing the difference between a seminarian and a priest, I'm like, oh my gosh, this priest is about to fight. So he takes off his shirt. He has a muscle shirt. He has this tattoo of a basketball in flames, and he pushes the guy right back. And as a young 16-year-old boy who played basketball, I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world. To see a seminarian, future priest, push another guy. It was like, you're not going to do that to me. So after I asked him, like, why did you, you're supposed to be a godly man, like, why did you do that? And he said, like, I love the Lord, but I'm also like human, and something very simple like that. And I was always sort of impressed by that. Anyway, so he sort of kind of became my mentor during high school and my early college years. I looked up to him, and I still do. He's actually the chaplain for the University of Notre Dame basketball team. And he was on ESPN a few years ago because they did a documentary on him because he could dunk, he could shoot, all that stuff. So he's a baller, and I just always remember just being, and I still am very enamored by the way he lives his life. There's something about how Father Pete lives his priesthood that's very attractive to me. Like, I want whatever you have. On the other end, I also have this friend who's married, who has 6 kids. His name is Marcos. And there's something about the way this man lives his family life that makes me want to live my family life in that same way. So I would say the first thing is, or the second thing is to seek out a man, a true man. Seek out a mentor that you can model in a way your life after. This is how he lives out his Catholic faith, and I want that. What do you do? What's your recipe? How do you live out your faith? And I would say start to model yourself after him in your own unique way. The third thing I would say in order to be a magnanimous person is to seek greatness in ordinary life. One of my favorite saints is Saint Jose Maria Escriva, and he says, you must realize now, more clearly than ever, that God is calling to serve him in and from the ordinary, secular and civil activities of human life. He waits for us every day in the laboratory, in the operating theater, in the army barracks, in the university chair, in the factory, in the workshop, in the fields, in the home, in all the immense reality of work. So I would say, seek greatness in your ordinary life. So what does that mean? I have bad news. There isn't a patron saint of waking up late yet. There isn't a patron saint of someone who slept in. If you look at the lives of the saints, and I know this sounds very basic, but if you look at the lives of the saints, even the life of Jesus, there was something about waking up early for a man that allows him to conquer the day. St. Jose Mauricio called it the heroic minute. Well, as soon as that alarm button as soon as he hears that alarm button, the temptation is to press snooze like 9 times. But he says, conquer that minute. Let that be your first act of virtue, of magnanimity for the day. So I would say practically set an alarm that you will commit to wake up to every single day. So I commit to waking up every single day at 5 a.m. And I say a few prayers. And it's only lasts for like 2 or 3 minutes, but sometimes that's all I can. Like that's with children. Sometimes that's all I can give to the Lord. So I kind of want to give you something practical, like set an alarm and commit to waking up. Avoid pressing the snooze, and even if that's your only act of virtue throughout the whole day, amen. The Lord will appreciate that sacrifice. Okay. Make your bed. I know this sounds really crazy, like really childish, but it's true. It's true because I know this is true because of my wife. Like, whenever my wife gets up early before me, she's like making coffee. I get up and I get the day going. If she comes back and she sees my room or our bed like sort of all over the place, she actually gets really upset. I'm like, well, you're just tripping. You're just a female. But I do think for women, they find like a messy room or a bed to be very unattractive. I think it reflects a deeper reality of maybe disorder of someone being unorganized, someone who's not attentive to those ordinary things that the Scriba is calling us to really possess. Eat well and exercise. I remember, I'm from New Orleans, so we put ketchup in everything. And I remember my first time eating breakfast with my wife, and I put ketchup on my scrambled eggs. I don't know if anyone else does that. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm not the only one. So I remember putting ketchup on my scrambled eggs, and I remember she was so repulsed by the fact that someone would put ketchup on their eggs. I think it is important to know that women do pay attention to what you eat and how you present yourself and your daily activity. And I think that's a fair assumption. I think that's a fair critique. Now, should we be men who are six-pack and obsessed with the gym? No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm just saying be aware of those things. Because when you can moderate what you eat, it reflects a deeper reality, right? It reflects the fact that you have temperance, that you have control over yourself, right? And this is the area I struggle with, big time. Even before I came here, I went to Beaver Creek and I had burger and fries, and I wanted to eat the dessert, but it just couldn't happen. All right, fourth thing, friendship. Don't be afraid. This is different than your mentor. Don't be afraid to enter into real, meaningful friendships with other men. And I understand why. I understand that's hard. I had the option today to come up to Flagstaff by myself. I didn't have to ask my friend to come with me. In fact, I'm introverted, so it would have been a nice 2-hour drive to just come up by myself. But I'm at a place in my life right now where I need other men. I just need a conversation with another man. And so I know my boy Deacon Brian was in town, so I'm like, hey, do you want to come up with me? And these 2 hours, it was great. We've been able to catch up. We've been able to talk about the faith. We've been able to talk about space. We've been able to talk about astronauts. We've been able to talk about the environment. He's a nerdy one. I'm not, but he's been teaching me. It's been great. But I understand why it's difficult to be in friendship with other men, because in friendship, what happens? It means if I'm really going to be friends with someone, it means that I'm going to be vulnerable, which we don't like to do. We don't like to be. It means that I'm going to trust you. And it means that I'm going to invite you into my mess. And that's a very hard thing for dudes to do. But I promise you that if you could find 2 or 3 men who you can invest in, pour your life into, and allow them to pour their life back into you, I think it will make your desire, your ability to grow in magnanimity easier, to really possess a greatness of soul. one of my favorite lines is from a French poet. He says, "A friend who suffers alone insults the other." So in other words, at the end of the day, we want to suffer with our friends. Like, imagine if your friends right now, they were like, "Oh, I've been going through stuff," and they didn't tell you about it for a year. Your first reaction is, "Why didn't you tell me that?" Because you know deep down inside that you want to join in their suffering with them. And so, I would say, find a friend, find 2 or 3 friends that you can really be vulnerable with and trust. Last thing. I've been waiting for this part. How long do I got, Father? Okay, good. You've got to be a man before you be a gentleman. So, the magnanimous person can't just think about being great. Like Aquinas says, he has to eventually do it. So, in order to be a gentleman, you have to first be a man. You have to know that and be convicted of the fact of the reality that you were created in the image and likeness of God as a man. And because of that, you have a duty to be intentional about everything that you do, including women. So, the first thing I would say, and this is just from talking to my former students, talking to females, being involved with young adults for the past 10 years, this is just things that I think women are starting to, this is the things that I'm seeing, that they find fairly unattractive, and then anyone else, you feel free to add. Let's start with our feet. Stand up. No, not always. A man never sits unless and until all women in the room are also sitting. Okay? Stand up when someone, man or woman, is trying to pass in front of you at the movies or at mass. You know what I mean? Like if you're in a pew and a girl's trying to pass, like stand up. Or maybe get out of the pew and just let them walk by. Little things like that. It shows intentionality. It shows I recognize a woman is walking in front of me. I don't want her to kind of squeeze in. It's just like a very practical thing. Get up, let her walk past. Okay? Walk on the street side of the sidewalk. Okay? So street side is where the cars are going. You want to make sure you walk on that side. Again, sounds stupid. Well, that's dumb, Ryan. But no, what does that actually communicate? I want to protect you. If someone turns the corner way too fast, or someone sort of veers off the road, I want to protect you. And for a woman, that really means something. Hands. Okay, moving from feet, hands. Give your hand to a woman palm up. So whenever she needs help from like coming down the stairs or maybe a bus, always give your hand palm up. And then help her out. Shake hands with all men, but don't offer your hand to a woman unless she extends hers first. When you're dancing, left hand should always be leading, and your right hand should be slightly above her waist. Things like that. Ladies first. Hold all doors open. At St. Mary's where I work, we've ingrained into our young men that at St. Mary's, if a man does not hold the door open for a young lady, he will get a summons. Meaning he has to pay $5. we take that very seriously at St. Mary's. We want our young men to get to the point where, especially with our young ladies, our dream at St. Mary's is to get to a point where our young ladies will just go to the door and stand in front of the door waiting for a guy to open a door for her because she's been so used to to having the door open for her during her 4 years at St. Mary's. So, open the door for her. Obviously, hold all chairs, bring all chairs out for her. A man also always pays. Now, let me just add something to this. Because if you're broke like me, one of the things that you have to really kind of be aware of is not every date has to be an expensive date. Be creative. Something I shared last year was when my wife and I were at Notre Dame. I couldn't afford anything. I was broke. So I met with a tour guide at the Basilica of the University of Notre Dame, and I said, "Can you teach me this? Like, give me your tour. I want to learn it." So he gave me the tour of the entire basilica, and it's about a 2-hour tour. It's pretty intense. If you've ever seen the basilica, it's really beautiful, very detailed. So I learned it, and so 2 weeks later, I decided to take my wife on a date. And so a tour of the entire basilica. It cost them nothing, right? So be creative, but I think men should always pay within reason, right? Last thing, mouth. This is something I'm learning a lot. So feet, hands, mouth. First, let me say, my wife hates how I eat, and that's just reality. But I do realize those are big things. Napkins belong on your on your lap. Okay, none of this like on your neck thing. Those things aren't cool. Like, it's amazing how many times I see that. I remember talking to a girl. She's like, he put his napkin around his neck, and it was like very so. Napkins loosely around your lap. Simple, but yeah. It also makes sense. Like if you're eating something, or like eating like wings and sauce drips down, like. The last thing you want it to be is here, right? Where you're talking to her, you're trying to, talk to her, and then there's like chunks of chicken wing sauce on there. You don't want that. Maybe it's better. Okay, don't talk with your mouth full. Don't clean or pick your teeth at the dinner table. Don't break or crumble crackers into soup, unless it's those. What is it called? Oyster crackers. Oyster crackers. But like saltine crackers, like, no need to break them in soup. Okay? Just dump the whole thing. Stop it. Don't blow on your food. Like if it's super hot, like especially on a date, like the last thing you want to do is to blow on your food. It just is really unattractive. And last thing, don't chew with your mouth open. I think I said that, but. Same thing. Why do I say that? Why do I say all this? It's because I really do believe that magnanimity and humility forces us to really think about things and allow us to be more intentional about how we live our masculinity. And obviously, who do we go to? We go to the Lord. So, I have like an examination of magnanimity. If you don't mind passing it out, helping me pass this out. First one, am I aware of my identity as a human being and of the power of my mind, heart, and will? Am I aware of my personal freedom? Have I been called to do great things above all, to develop my personality and the personality of those around me? Do I know this? So do you know you've been called to be great? Do you seek the company of other magnanimous people who, through their advice and by their example, help me to be more magnanimous? Do I set high goals for myself and others? Do I strive daily to improve my character and behavior? Do I know what I'm good at doing? Have I ever asked my friends to help me discover what I'm good at and to improve? As important as it is to struggle against my defects, I should be more concerned to develop and augment my strength. Am I? Do I have confidence in myself and in my talents and abilities? Have I discerned a mission in life? Do I focus on accomplishing my mission, or do I become distracted by peripheral matters? Do I try to inspire a sense of mission in my friends and colleagues? Do I give free rein to my imagination? Do I find ways to nourish it so that it bears more fruit? Am I able to make bold decisions, or am I risk averse? Does my fear of making mistakes cause me to be indecisive? Going back to the whole weird thing about praying discernment thing, women don't like indecisive men. Women like men who know, who are convicted of a decision. The only thing I have to fear is not the evil that others do, but the good I fail to do. Do I realize this? Do I see obstacles as summits to be conquered, or do I give in to pessimism? Do I seek to address the problems of humanity, or do I see them as opportunities to grow in magnanimity? Do I respect the dignity of others, especially the ones I lead? Do I lead by example rather than compulsion? Do I teach rather than command, inspire rather than browbeat? Let's go back down. Do I solicit the input of others in solving problems? Do I make use of their contributions? Do I refrain from interfering in the work of my subordinates unless I have good reason? Do I avoid treating them like children? Do I avoid the temptation to do subordinates' work for them? Do I readily delegate power, transfer decision-making power to subordinates? Do I foster in my team a culture of freedom and personal responsibility so that everyone truly participates in decision-making and feels accountable? Do I do everything I can to strengthen the commitment of team members to the shared mission? Let's just go back down to the bottom. Do I promote my organization rather than myself? Do I avoid making myself indispensable? Do I share information? Do I create the conditions whereby others can successfully finish what I started? So this is just an examination. If you're kind of wondering, where am I in this magnanimity thing? Where am I in this humility thing? This will be a good guide to focus. Thank you. That's great.
Hopefully you can see a little bit of why I asked Ryan to come here tonight is, it's like Jesus says, that he who can be trusted and is faithful in small matters can be entrusted with great ones. And so we're being invited, I think, as men to become masters of ourselves and just for our own sake, first and foremost, but especially if God's calling us to marriage, like women see that. And it's very unattractive. And so, yeah, we haven't even, there's all sorts of things we could go into from here, even dating and stuff. There's a girl, the other day she said to me, she's like, I've had like 4 dating relationships, but no guy has ever asked me out. I was like, ooh. So they slipped from the friend zone to the, I guess we're together zone, and then out again, but like never was asked out. It was interesting. And like, she said that with this desire of like, girls want to be pursued, and so, and taken seriously and all that. So why don't we take about 10 minutes here, and what I'd like to do is, some of us I know are in small groups already. If you're in a small group, who's in a small group already? A small group Bible study, that kind of stuff. Why don't you guys we'll have you guys get into a group, and then the rest of us will kind of either maybe hop in or kind of sort that out. Maybe, freshmen, sophomore guys, we can get together.